David Muir reporting. Tonight, a significant development emerges in the search for Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of today's show co-host Savannah Guthrie. Since her disappearance, Sheriff Chris Nanos has appeared repeatedly on major news networks, holding press conferences and providing continual updates. Yet among all his statements, one remark made just days ago has turned the spotlight up on the case. Investigators believe they know why Nancy Guthrie was taken. But is that the full story, or is there more hidden behind his words? Let's dive in. Before we dive into what the sheriff revealed, there's a crucial point we need to address. Not because it's easy, but because it helps explain why so many following this case have begun to doubt, and in some minds, already feared the worst for Nancy Guthrie. For weeks, attention has fixated on the masked figure in the doorbell footage, DNA leads, ransom notes, and the reward. But behind all that, another story has been quietly unfolding, about the man giving the updates. Recently, the Arizona Republic published an in-depth look into Sheriff Chris Nanos's professional record, sourcing police files from the El Paso Police Department. These findings are now part of the verified public record. It's significant enough that we can't skip it. Puma County Sheriff Chris Nanos is disputing claims that his early career resume was misrepresented. He's now addressing those questions directly in a one-on-one with News 4 Tucson's Monica Garcia. Monica asked about her one-on-one with Sheriff Chris Nanos. He insisted there was never any intention to mislead about his resume. The discrepancies, he said, were administrative errors now corrected. The questions focused on his early career with the El Paso Police Department, specifically whether his public resume matched official records. Nanos's resume listed his El Paso service from 1976 to 1984, but he says it should have ended in 1982. Another error listed his promotion to captain in 2009 instead of 2007. He explained, "No attempt to mislead. Over 40 years, spanning 6 decades, documents get mixed up and a few dates slip." The report also noted early disciplinary issues during his El Paso tenure, adding another layer to the scrutiny around the sheriff. When pressed about his early career, Sheriff Chris Nanos acknowledged mistakes from his youth. He admitted to wrecking 5 patrol cars over 6 years and occasionally arriving late to briefings, behaviors that earned him disciplinary notes. "Those experiences shaped my career," he said, noting that in over 40 years in Pima County, he has had no recent discipline. Nanos began law enforcement in El Paso, Texas, in February 1976. His early record included high-risk work as a decoy officer and a 1980 Officer of the Year award for saving a partner's life, verified achievements. But police records obtained by the Arizona Republic tell a more complicated story. Over 6 years in El Paso, Nanos accumulated 26 internal allegations: excessive force, accidental firearm discharge, off-duty gambling, tardiness, failure to report, threats, and dereliction of duty, painting a career that started with both distinction and controversy. Over those 6 years in El Paso, Nanos faced a total of 37 days of suspension or unpaid leave. His longest suspension came in March 1982, 15 days, after allegations that he kicked and struck robbery suspect Carlos Urias, who ended up in the ICU. Police assault charges were filed, but a grand jury declined to indict. Later that year, the department gave Nanos a stark choice: resign or be fired, citing insubordination and consistent inefficiency. He chose to resign. When he moved to Arizona, 2 years mysteriously disappeared from his public resume. It listed his El Paso service ending in 1984 instead of 1982. Arizona Republic reporting confirmed the errors were administrative, not intentional. Nanos's response to disciplinary questions was deflective, joking about high school incidents. He began his Pima County career in 1984 as a corrections officer, climbed the ranks over decades, and ultimately became sheriff, a trajectory marked by both controversy and longevity. Even before Nancy Guthrie vanished, questions about Nanos's leadership were mounting. In January 2024, the Puma County Deputies Organization held a vote of no confidence. Of the 86 deputies who participated, 85 voted against him, 98.8% expressing doubt in his command. Union President Sergeant Aaron Cross cited years of frustration over mismanagement and poor leadership. warning that exposing it could invite retaliation. By November 2024, Nanos faced re-election. His challenger was Lieutenant Heather Lappin, a 19-year veteran and one of his own deputies. In the weeks leading up to the vote, Nanos placed Lappin on administrative leave, restricted her to home during business hours, and limited her campaign activities. The Puma County Board of Supervisors requested investigations by both the Arizona Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney General into whether these actions amounted to election interference. When Nancy Guthrie was reported missing on February 1, 2026, Sheriff Nanos showed up at the scene personally, a rarity for missing person cases. Blood confirmed as Nancy's marked the entryway, the doorbell camera had been removed, her medication sat untouched, and her phone and Apple Watch remained behind. Homicide investigators were brought in immediately. Nanos read the scene correctly. This was a crime. But managing an investigation and communicating it are separate skills. In the first week, he held 3 formal press conferences, the last on February 5. Afterward, he shifted to one-on-one interviews. Fox News got one version, NBC another, Daily Mail a third, News Nation a fourth. The result was a messaging chaos. Retired FBI agent James Gaglano called it a fundamental failure, with information released inconsistently, walked back, and reshaped differently for each outlet. The story of Nancy's disappearance quickly became a story about the contradictions in how it was being reported. Then came the controversial lab decision. The mixed DNA collected from Nancy Guthrie's home, the sample that could hold the suspect's genetic profile, was sent by Sheriff Nanos to DNA Labs International in Deerfield Beach, Florida, bypassing the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia. That facility not only houses the nation's most advanced forensic tools, but also links directly to genetic genealogy networks that have solved high-profile cases. FBI sources told News Nation and Reuters they had requested access to both the DNA and a glove found at the scene, but were denied. One source called it insane, while another said field investigators weren't even sure who was leading the case, the sheriff or the FBI. A federal official added that the evidence would still need FBI retesting, delaying a case where every hour counts. Kristen Middleman, co-founder of Orem, the Texas lab behind the Brian Koberger identification, called the decision devastating. She said she couldn't understand why the evidence wasn't sent to Quantico, where processing would be faster, more precise, and immediately integrated into the genealogy pipeline. Kristen Middleman was clear. The Florida lab produces a standard DNA profile, but turning that profile into a genealogical family tree requires the specialized pipeline at Quantico, something designed to bypass extra steps. Nanos denied blocking the FBI, claiming he kept all evidence at one contracted lab for consistency, arguing that splitting samples could create conflicting results. That's his explanation. But former Chief Deputy Richard Castigard Jr., Nanos' second-in-command for decades, told the Daily Mail the case should have been handed to federal authorities 2 full weeks earlier. Castigard described Nanos as a classic micromanager. One source quoted by the American Tribune went further. The FBI really did not know what to do. He was stonewalling them, their hands were tied. Meanwhile, as the investigation stalled and Savannah Guthrie's family posted desperate Instagram messages to a potential kidnapper, Nanos attended an Arizona Wildcats NAA basketball game, raising questions about priorities at a critical moment in the search. Here's where the story gets messy, and viewers need to weigh fact versus allegation carefully. Journalist Ashley Banfield claimed on her podcast, citing an unnamed law enforcement source, that Tommaso Taioni, Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law and the last person known to see her alive, was a prime suspect. That claim has never been verified by any official agency. Tied to this, Annie Guthrie's car was impounded, creating a reported connection to Tommaso. Banfield's source suggested he was the main focus, though the Puma County Sheriff's Department repeatedly stated there were no named suspects or persons of interest. On February 16, Sheriff Chris Nanos publicly cleared the entire Guthrie family, labeling online speculation cruel and shameful. Yet the detail that went largely unnoticed: Tommaso and Annie's vehicle remained in the evidence bay for weeks, long after the family was officially exonerated, leaving questions about what investigators were still probing. Searches at the Guthrie property continued, with items still catalogued and removed. Publicly, the family was labeled victims, Yet investigative actions persisted in ways that didn't fully align with that portrayal. Some observers see this as a gap, suggesting the clearance was more about optics than actual investigation. Others argue it reflects standard procedure. Even cleared individuals can remain part of evidence gathering for elimination purposes. Viewers must decide which interpretation fits the 46-day timeline. What is indisputable? The sheriff overseeing the case has a long-standing tension with the FBI, sent key evidence to Florida rather than Quantico, and left federal investigators unsure of who was in charge. Analysts suggest, as a working theory, that his public claim of knowing the motive may be far less straightforward than presented. The sheriff's statement, "We know why, but I won't tell you," can be read in two ways. On one hand, it could signal genuine investigative caution, keeping sensitive theories from tipping off a suspect. On the other, it might serve as a public relations move, projecting progress while redirecting attention from structural flaws in the investigation toward speculation about the suspect's psychology. Neither reading is confirmed. Both remain plausible given the available evidence. On March 12, 2026, Nanos told NBC correspondent Liz Kreutz that investigators believed they understood the motive from the first hours of the case, and that this belief had only strengthened over more than 40 days of forensic work. He emphasized the crime was targeted, not random. Nancy Guthrie was chosen for a specific reason before anyone approached her home. Pressed on burglary theories, he refused to elaborate, saying, "We have our beliefs. Everyone else has theirs." He also warned the public that the suspect could strike again, stating, "Criminal minds are criminal minds. Don't think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you're safe." Retired FBI supervisory agent Jason Pack later explained this type of silence as a standard professional framework, protecting the integrity of the investigation while managing public risk. When a law enforcement official says they know the motive but withholds details, it is deliberate. Revealing the motive would give a suspect a roadmap, showing which evidence is being prioritized, which relationships are under scrutiny, and what to manipulate or destroy. Retired FBI agent Jason Pack noted this as standard practice, though it creates tension with public safety. Once the public is warned the suspect could strike again, questions arise about who is at risk and what precautions to take. The deeper issue is not why Nanos withheld the motive, but why, after 40-plus days, this knowledge has not produced a named suspect, person of interest, or arrest. Retired Las Vegas homicide detective Phil Ramos explained on March 13, 2026, that motive is just one part of a criminal case. Means and opportunity are also required. Knowing why a crime occurred defines the suspect category but does not pinpoint a single individual. In Ramos's view, Nanos signaling that the crime was targeted communicates progress. The investigators understand the type of suspect involved without yet having identified the who or how. The choice of Nancy Guthrie specifically shows a connection, not necessarily close, but intentional. The framework is clear. The puzzle pieces are still being assembled. The choice to target Nancy suggests prior knowledge, and prior knowledge points to a connection. Some hidden thread linking the masked figure on the doorbell footage to the house, arriving with intent and possibly a plan. 44 days into the investigation, that thread has yet to be fully traced. Publicly, experts have proposed 3 motive frameworks, but they do not all align. Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffendafer, with 25 years of experience, told Newsweek on March 13, 2026, that Nanos's words reveal the nuance. The motive had been evident from day one. From the first hours of the investigation, before forensic results, ransom notes, or the FBI task force, investigators were focused on a kidnapping for ransom scenario. That early focus shaped the family's public appeals and framed the initial investigative strategy. From the start, every move in Nancy Guthrie's case assumed she had been deliberately taken to extract something from her family. Savannah's Instagram plea, "We are willing to pay," was more than a public appeal. It was a tactical response to the suspected motive. The FBI immediately paired hostage negotiation experts with forensic teams, shaping their early strategy around ransom. The demands, $4 million by February 5, rising to $6 million by February 9, were not random. They reflected what the perpetrators calculated the family could produce. Savannah's publicly reported net worth of $40 million and $8 million annual salary provided a clear financial roadmap. Retired FBI agent James Galliano, who handled kidnappings in Mexico City, highlighted the rarity of the profile. Of over 54,000 U.S. abductions between January 2025 and January 2026, only 168 involved victims aged 80 to 89. He had never encountered an octogenarian victim personally. This underscores that Nancy's abduction was not random. It was a deliberate targeting, signaling a motive crafted for her specifically, not a generic crime of opportunity. The targeting in Nancy Guthrie's case is deliberate, pointing to a specific motive, but experts go further. Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffendafer, with 25 years of field experience, stated publicly that the absence of proof of life likely isn't a tactic. By the time the initial ransom demands emerged, Nancy was probably already gone. The crime had failed. Johnny Grusing, another former FBI agent specializing in violent crimes and missing persons, highlighted a critical flaw in the ransom operation. In legitimate, financially motivated kidnappings, communications are private, directly to the family or financial decision-makers. Here, the messages went to TMZ and local news outlets. That's not operational tradecraft, it's a signal. The focus wasn't profit, it was publicity. The abduction, he argued, was designed to create noise, not a controlled transaction. Johnny Grusing studied the suspect's approach closely. The gun, carried across the front of the body, was tactically awkward, more for intimidation than real use. Combined with the footage, covering the camera, pressing the doorbell instead of forcing entry, staying out of Nancy's view, a clear picture emerged. This was about confrontation, not a financial plan. When the encounter went off script, the removal became a reaction, not the original intent. Dr. Ann Burgess, a founding FBI behavioral profiler, offered a separate lens on the case during the Surviving the Survivor podcast, focusing on psychological triggers rather than tactics. Dr. Burgess framed this as a personal crime, driven by grievance rather than opportunity. She asked the profilers key questions. Who benefits? Who is most affected? Nancy Guthrie herself had no public profile, no visible wealth. She was not an obvious target. Former FBI and CIA agent Tracy Walder suggested the real focus was Savannah Guthrie. Nancy was simply the accessible link, a vulnerable, elderly figure whose home offered the easiest entry to someone fixated on her daughter. None of these theories have been confirmed by Sheriff Nanos or official sources, but they represent the most informed professional reading after 46 days of investigation. The phrase, "the very terrible," is deliberate. Nanos has maintained strong beliefs from day one. For 46 days, the investigators have held a working theory about why Nancy was taken, even as the country watched vigils, social media appeals, and a family's anguish unfold in public. After 46 days, the motive remains a theory, strong, persistent, but without a name, a charge, or an arrest. Understanding why is not the same as identifying who. That gap has defined the investigation from day one. Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffendafer offered a stark reading. No proof of life, ransom deadlines passed unanswered, communications sent to media instead of the family. By standard kidnapping templates, the silence suggests the victim was already gone. Not a certainty, but the most evidence-aligned conclusion. Retired FBI agent Steve Moore added another layer. The $1.2 million reward produced no leads because the circle of knowledge is closed. Only the perpetrators know what happened. Any breakthrough will come from science, DNA, cell tower data, genetic genealogy, or painstaking forensic review, not from tips or chance. Retired FBI agent Moore warned the danger is ongoing. If the crime wasn't purely financial, the underlying compulsion hasn't vanished. The perpetrator learned a grim lesson. Violence against a vulnerable target can succeed without immediate consequence. The fourth layer is moral. Whatever drove the act, ransom, obsession, grievance, it exploited Nancy Guthrie's trust, her 84 years of openness and goodwill. Targeted may sound clinical, but it masks the human reality. Someone studied her life, her habits, and chose her specifically. For 46 days, that person remains unnamed. No arrests, no confirmed suspect, DNA still sits at the Florida lab, and federal sources warn it will have to be retested by the FBI, adding more time to a case where every hour counts. Zem, Viet Bang Ky Hu Mao. Viet Non Han Du Dai Van Ban Mao. The investigation remains active but unresolved. Gloves found near the scene traced back to a restaurant employee, closing that lead. FBI genetic genealogy work continues, while thousands of hours of footage are still under review at Quantico. Cadaver dogs were withdrawn on day 39, and the Guthrie home has returned to the family after a final forensic sweep. No proof of life has emerged in 46 days. Investigators also examined a damaged utility box and a neighbor's ring camera that went dark the night Nancy disappeared. Details only pursued 5 weeks later when the FBI canvassed the neighborhood. Meanwhile, the rewards remain active. The Guthries have committed $1 million for any information leading to Nancy's recovery, keeping hope alive even as critical questions linger. The rewards for Nancy Guthrie's recovery total over $1.2 million. The FBI offers $200,000 for an arrest and conviction, half anonymously contributed, while Puma County, Crime Stoppers, and other programs add another $12,500. Tips can be submitted globally, by phone at 1-800-LLFBI or 520-35149, and online at tips.fbi.gov. Science is moving forward independently of politics. Genetic genealogy solved the Golden State Killer case through a distant relative's DNA years after the crime. In Nancy's case, a parent, sibling, or cousin may have already submitted DNA unknowingly, and cell tower records, video, and forensic review could provide answers without any confession. This investigation is ongoing. The pace may frustrate the public, but the evidence may yet speak. Questions remain. Is Sheriff Chris Nanos withholding the motive purely to protect the investigation, or is something else at play? And what about Tommaso? The family's public clearance versus ongoing private searches. Does that make sense to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe and share.